Initial contact. The crystalline spires of the Galactic Concordet's central embassy gleamed under the light of 3 suns, their surfaces reflecting the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 civilizations. Inside, High Ambassador Xelterra watched the holographic display with growing concern. The primitive vessel approaching their border outpost shouldn't have worried her. Its crude fusion drives and metallic hull were centuries behind Concordat technology. Yet something about this first contact felt different. "Your assessment, Science Director?" she asked, her inner membranes flickering with anxiety. Science Director Von Rill adjusted his sensory arrays, multiple eyes focusing on the data streams. "The species calls themselves humans. Their technological level is approximately grade 7 on the advancement scale. They've barely achieved rudimentary interplanetary travel within their own system. Yet they've found us," Xelterra noted. "Their navigation calculations must be exceptional." "A lucky accident," Von Rill dismissed. "Their mathematics are basic. They likely stumbled upon our outpost through random exploration." The human ship, designated as Explorer 1, continued its approach. Its design was ungainly by Concordat standards, all sharp angles and exposed structural elements. No aesthetic consideration, no elegant efficiency, just raw functionality. "They're broadcasting again," the communications officer announced. "Same message, multiple frequencies. They're requesting peaceful contact." Xelterra studied the vessel's profile. Standard protocol for grade 7 civilizations was clear: minimal contact, technological quarantine, and observation until they reached at least grade 5. It had worked for countless species before, yet something nagged at her consciousness. "Show me their world," she commanded. The holographic display shifted, presenting images of Earth, a planet of striking contrasts. Vast oceans beside arid deserts, frozen poles and tropical forests. But it was the human cities that caught her attention. They sprawled across the landscape, seemingly chaotic yet somehow purposeful. Their architecture showed no uniform style, instead displaying a riot of different approaches existing side by side. "Fascinating," she murmured. "They accept inefficiency for the sake of variety." "A sign of their primitive nature," Von Rill insisted. "No advanced civilization would waste resources on such disorder." The next images showed human history, wars and peace, destruction and creation, all cycling faster than any species the Concordat had encountered. They advanced not in the steady, measured pace of proper civilization, but in great leaps followed by periods of consolidation. "Their development pattern is erratic," Von Rill noted with disapproval. "They discover new principles almost by accident, through unsystematic experimentation, rather than proper theoretical progression." Xelterra watched as humans went from primitive flight to space travel in less than a century. "Or perhaps," she suggested, "they simply think differently than we do." The debate was interrupted by a priority alert. Explorer 1 had changed course slightly, adjusting to avoid a micrometeoroid that the Concordat's sensors had only just detected. The maneuver was executed with surprising precision. "Impossible," Von Rill declared, checking the data. "Their sensors shouldn't be capable of detecting objects that small." "Unless," Xelterra realized, "they're more advanced in some areas than their overall technology suggests." The implications troubled her. The Concordat's classification system had worked flawlessly for millennia. Species progressed through technological grades in a predictable sequence, each advancement building logically on the last. But these humans, they seemed to develop in patches, excelling in some areas while remaining primitive in others. "We should proceed with standard protocols," Von Rill advised. "Quarantine them until they achieve proper advancement through normal channels." Xelterra watched as Explorer 1 executed another perfect correction. These humans had crossed interstellar space in a ship that barely qualified as spaceworthy by Concordat standards. They had done it not through approved methods, but through some combination of determination, innovation, and what appeared to be extremely creative use of limited technology. "No," she decided. "Standard protocols assume standard development. We need to understand them better before making any decisions. High Ambassador Von Rell protested. Regulations are clear regarding Grade 7 civilizations. Regulations, Selterra reminded him, are based on experience. And I suspect these humans are about to give us some new experiences. She opened a channel to Explorer 1. The response was immediate, eager yet controlled. The humans had been waiting patiently, maintaining their position without any signs of aggression or fear. "Welcome to Concordat space," she transmitted in the simplified language used for first contacts. "We have much to discuss." The reply came back in perfect Concordat standard language. "Indeed we do, High Ambassador. Indeed we do." Zelterra's membranes flickered in surprise. They had decoded the language already. Perhaps it was time to reevaluate more than just first contact protocols. These humans might just force the Concordat to question some very old assumptions about how civilizations should develop. In her long career, Zelterra had overseen first contact with dozens of species, but as she prepared to meet the human representatives face to face, she had a strong feeling that this encounter would be different. These humans didn't just break the rules. They seemed completely unaware that rules were supposed to exist at all. The next few cycles would either prove her right about humanity's potential or prove Von Rell right about the wisdom of standard protocols. Either way, she suspected the Concordat was about to learn some valuable lessons about the danger of underestimating a species just because they did things differently. What no one in the Concordat could know was that this moment would later be marked in galactic history as the point where everything began to change. Not with a war or a technological revolution, but with a simple choice to look past appearances and recognize that progress doesn't always follow a predictable path. The question of progress. 20 standard cycles had passed since first contact, and Science Director Von Rell's predictions had proven both right and catastrophically wrong. The humans were indeed unpredictable, but not in the way anyone had expected. "Impossible," he muttered, studying the latest data from Earth. "They can't have already mastered quantum field manipulation. It defies all developmental models." The monitoring station's holographic displays showed a planet transformed. Where once crude fusion reactors had powered human cities, now strange devices that bent space itself provided nearly limitless energy. Their ships still looked ungainly and primitive from the outside, but sensors couldn't penetrate their hulls anymore. High Ambassador Zelterra, now Supreme Coordinator of Extraordinary Development, studied the reports with growing fascination. They're not following any known scientific progression. Look at their communication technology. They completely skipped over standard faster-than-light principles and developed something entirely new. The human approach to advancement had shattered every prediction model the Concordat possessed. Instead of building upon established principles, they seemed to dive into whatever field caught their interest, developing solutions that shouldn't have been possible with their level of technology. Their latest breakthrough is particularly concerning, Von Rell noted, bringing up a new data set. They've somehow developed a form of artificial intelligence that doesn't follow any known computational principles. It's as if they looked at our quantum computers and decided to try something completely different instead. Zelterra's membranes rippled with amusement. "Remember when you said they needed to be quarantined until they developed properly? It seems they had other ideas." The humans had indeed refused to be isolated. Not through force or diplomacy, but simply by advancing in ways the Concordat hadn't thought possible. Their ships now routinely visited Concordat space, trading and sharing knowledge. But for every piece of technology they shared, observers noted dozens more that remained mysterious. "They're preparing something big," Von Rell insisted. "These advances, these seemingly random leaps in technology, they must have a purpose." A junior analyst interrupted their discussion, inner membranes flashing with excitement. "Supreme Coordinator, we've detected an unusual energy signature from the Sol system. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." The main display shifted, showing a massive construction in Earth orbit. It was beautiful in a distinctly human way, functional yet artistic, powerful yet elegant. Energy patterns rippled around it in ways that defied conventional physics. "What are we looking at?" Zelterra asked, though she already suspected the answer. "They're calling it the Unity," the analyst reported. "Initial readings suggest it's some kind of deep space vessel, but—" he hesitated, checking his data again. "Its power signature suggests capabilities far beyond anything in our database." Von Rohl's sensory arrays twitched nervously. "We should have restricted their development when we had the chance. Now they've become too unpredictable, too powerful." "No," Zelterra corrected, watching the Unity's strange energy patterns with wonder. "Now they've become exactly what they were always meant to be." She turned to her old friend and colleague. "Don't you see, Von Rohl? We didn't fail to restrict them. We succeeded in letting them show us something new." The Unity grew larger on their screens, its hull seeming to shift and flow like liquid metal. Human ships moved around it in complex patterns, their movements suggesting capabilities that shouldn't have been possible for vessels their size. "They're not following our path of development," Zelterra continued, "because they're not trying to become like us. They're becoming something entirely new." She gestured at the displays, showing Earth's transformed civilization. "Every time we thought we understood their limitations, they simply found another way forward." A new alert caught their attention. The Unity was powering up its main systems, and the energy readings were off the scale. But instead of the chaos their models predicted, the massive energies were being channeled with incredible precision. "They've mastered forces we barely understand," Von Rohl admitted reluctantly. "But to what end? What do they plan to do with all this power?" As if in answer, a transmission from Earth reached their station. It was coded for Zelterra personally, and as she read it, her membranes shifted through colors of surprise, concern, and finally, understanding. "They want to help," she announced. "There's a crisis coming, one our predictive models missed. The humans saw it coming and have been preparing, not to challenge us, but to save us all." The Unity's energy signature suddenly changed, and for a moment, space itself seemed to bend around the massive ship. Then, in a display of technology that should have been impossible for any Grade 7 civilization, it simply vanished. "Where did they go?" Von Rohl demanded, his sensors searching frantically for any trace of the vessel. Zelterra's answer was interrupted by another alert. The Unity had reappeared, but not anywhere near Earth. Somehow, it had traversed half the galaxy in an instant. "They'd gone to where they're needed," she said simply. "And soon, we'll all understand why isolation was the best gift we could have given them." The void between stars. The Concordat's emergency council chamber hadn't been used in over 1,000 cycles. Now, representatives from every major species crowded the vast space, their voices a cacophony of fear and confusion. At the center of the chamber, a hologram showed the impossible, a tear in spacetime itself, growing larger by the moment. "The anomaly appeared 3 days ago," the chief scientist explained, her crystalline form vibrating with stress. "It's consuming everything in its path. Matter, energy, even the fabric of space itself. Our most advanced models suggest it will reach major population centers within 50 cycles. Can it be stopped?" The question came from dozens of voices at once. "Our weapons have no effect. Our strongest containment fields barely slow it. The chief scientist paused as new data flowed across her sensors. "The human vessel Unity has arrived at the anomaly's location." The chamber's main display shifted, showing the massive Earth ship approaching the spatial tear. Even the Unity seemed small compared to the cosmic wound that threatened to devour the galaxy. But something about the ship's approach struck Zelterra as deliberate, almost confident. "They're not running," she observed. They knew this was coming. New energy signatures bloomed around the Unity, patterns that defied conventional physics. The ship's hull seemed to ripple, sections folding into geometries that hurt to look at. Smaller craft emerged, each moving with impossible precision. How are they maintaining structural integrity that close to the anomaly? Von Rohl demanded. The gravitational forces alone should be tearing them apart. A transmission reached the chamber, audio only. The human voice was calm, almost casual. Concordat Control, this is Unity Actual. We're picking up some interesting readings from your spatial tier. Mind if we take a closer look? Before anyone could respond, the Unity's smaller craft began arranging themselves in a complex pattern around the anomaly. Energy beams connected them, forming a lattice of light that somehow remained stable despite the tremendous forces involved. Impossible, the chief scientist whispered. They're creating a containment field orders of magnitude stronger than anything we can generate. But the principles they're using. She trailed off, her crystalline form flickering in confusion. The human voice came again. We've seen something like this before, actually. Well, not exactly like this, but similar enough. Had a small one tried to open up near Jupiter about 5 cycles ago. Gave us quite a puzzle to solve. The Unity's main body was transforming now, sections unfolding to reveal devices that seemed to bend reality around them. The ship's AI began broadcasting data, not just measurements, but detailed analysis of the anomaly's structure and behavior. They've been studying this phenomenon. Cell Terra realized, all those seemingly random technological leaps, they were preparing for this moment. But how could they have known? Von Rill asked. Our best predictive models didn't see this coming. Because, a new voice answered, we weren't limited by knowing what was supposed to be impossible. A human figure appeared in the chamber's holographic projector, Captain Sarah Chen of the Unity, her image steady despite being transmitted across half a galaxy. When you don't know something can't be done, you're free to try anything. The display showed new energy patterns emerging from the Unity's containment lattice. The anomaly's growth slowed, then stopped. Measurements that had been spiraling into infinity began to stabilize. The thing about space-time tiers, Captain Chen continued conversationally, as if she weren't directing the most sophisticated containment operation ever attempted, is that they're actually quite predictable if you look at them the right way. You just have to be willing to accept that sometimes the rules you know aren't the only rules that exist. The anomaly was shrinking now, its tremendous energies being channeled and contained by human technology that worked on principles the Concordat's finest minds couldn't begin to understand. The Unity's smaller craft maintained their perfect formation, their energy lattice adapting and evolving as the situation demanded. We'll have this cleaned up in a few hours, Chen assured them. Then maybe we can talk about some other issues we've noticed. There are a few more of these tiers forming in other sectors, smaller ones, but they'll need attention eventually. The chamber erupted in questions and demands for explanation, but Cell Terra remained silent, watching the humans work. They had taken a force that threatened galactic civilization and turned it into a problem to be solved, approaching it with neither fear nor arrogance, but with the simple confidence of people who had learned to trust their own ways of thinking. You know what the really interesting thing is, Chen added, a slight smile visible in her holographic image. We probably wouldn't have figured this out if we developed normally. Sometimes the best way forward is the path that everyone else thinks is wrong. Paradigm shift. The aftermath of the Unity's intervention sent shockwaves through the Concordat's carefully ordered society. In the great archive hall of the Central Worlds, previously unquestioned theories were being rewritten. Scholars and scientists from 100 species pored over the data humans had shared, their worldviews crumbling in the face of new possibilities. Their approach defies all established principles, Grand Theorist Kolunks declared, his crystalline form shifting colors rapidly in agitation. They treat our most advanced physics like guidelines rather than laws. Cell Terra watched the debates with growing amusement. Across the hall, different species argued about the implications of human technology. Some wanted to immediately adopt human methods, while others insisted this chaos would lead to disaster. You seem entertained, Supreme Coordinator, Von Rill observed, approaching her observation platform. I'm remembering something Captain Chen said during the crisis, Cell Terra replied, about how not knowing something was impossible made it easier to achieve. Look at them all, Von Rill. For the first time in centuries, they're questioning everything. The main display showed the Unity, now stationed near the Concordats' capital world. 3 more spatial tiers had been detected and contained in the past week, each operation revealing new aspects of human capability. But it wasn't just their technology that was causing upheaval. The Vorex Collective is demanding immediate trade negotiations with Earth, Von Rell reported. The Meridian Alliance wants to establish joint research projects. Even the quantum consciousness is attempting communication. And what of the traditional faction? Cell-Terra asked, referring to the growing movement that opposed human influence. Growing more vocal, but losing support. It's hard to argue for isolation when humans keep solving problems we thought unsolvable. A commotion near the hall's center drew their attention. A human scientific team had arrived, led by Dr. Maya Patel. Unlike the military precision of the Unity's crew, these humans moved with the casual energy of excited scholars. They carried devices that seemed cobbled together from disparate parts, yet performed functions that the Concordats' finest technology couldn't match. The interesting thing about space-time tiers, Dr. Patel was explaining to a group of fascinated xenophysicists, is that they're not really tiers at all. They're more like windows. Once you understand the underlying geometry, they're actually quite beautiful. She activated one of her devices, projecting a hologram that showed the structure of the anomalies in ways the Concordat sensors never could. The alien scientists crowded around, their previous certainties forgotten in the face of new understanding. They're not just sharing technology, Cell-Terra noted. They're sharing a way of thinking. That's what worries the traditional faction, Von Rell replied. They say this human chaos will spread, disrupting thousands of years of stable development. Good. Von Rell's sensory arrays twitched in surprise. Supreme Coordinator. Look at our history, old friend. We've spent millennia advancing along carefully planned paths, each step logically following the last. And where has it led us? We couldn't even see these tiers forming, let alone stop them. A new alert drew their attention. The Unity had detected another anomaly, larger than the others, forming in the space between spiral arms. But instead of rushing to contain it, Captain Chen had invited Concordat scientists aboard to observe and participate in the operation. They're teaching us, Cell-Terra realized. Not just the technology, but the mindset, the willingness to try the impossible. The display shifted to show the Unity approaching the new tier. This time, Concordat ships flew alongside it, their crews learning to see space-time in new ways. The human vessel's impossible geometries were beginning to make sense to alien minds that had never considered such possibilities. The traditional faction is right about one thing, Von Rell admitted. Nothing will be the same after this. No, Cell-Terra agreed. It will be better. In the archive hall below them, Dr. Patel's team was demonstrating another device, this one seemingly assembled from spare parts. Yet it performed functions that should have required a facility the size of a small moon. The watching aliens had stopped taking notes, their expressions showing the beginning of a fundamental shift in understanding. You know what the most revolutionary thing about humans is? Cell-Terra asked, watching the scene unfold. It's not their technology, or even their creativity. It's their willingness to share it all, to teach others to think differently. The Unity's containment operation was beginning. This time, alien ships joined the energy lattice, their crews learning to bend reality alongside their human teachers. It wasn't perfect. Some ships struggled to maintain position, others couldn't quite generate the right energy patterns. But they were learning. They're not trying to dominate us, Cell-Terra continued. They're inviting us to grow with them, to explore possibilities we never considered. A new dawn. The great council chamber of the Concordat had changed. Where once representatives sat in rigid hierarchical arrangements, now the space had been reorganized into collaborative clusters. Species that had once competed for status now worked together, sharing insights and possibilities that would have been unthinkable months ago. At the chamber's center, Captain Chen and Dr. Patel stood before the assembled representatives. The Unity's hologram floated above them, its impossible geometries no longer seeming strange to eyes that had learned to see differently. The spatial tiers have been fully mapped, Chen reported. We've identified the underlying pattern and developed preventive measures that any civilization can implement with their existing technology. She smiled. Once you understand the principles, it's actually quite simple. Simple. A traditional faction speaker rose. You've overturned our understanding of physics, challenged our social structures, and introduced chaos into our ordered development. How is any of this simple? Because, Dr. Patil answered, you're still thinking in terms of order versus chaos. We've found that the most elegant solutions often lie in between, in the space where structure and creativity meet. The hologram shifted, showing a new image. The combined fleets of humanity and the Concordat, working together to seal a spatial tier. Ships of different species moved in perfect coordination, each contributing their unique capabilities to the whole. Look at what we've achieved together, Chen continued. Not by following predetermined paths, but by learning from each other. Your precision and our innovation. Your experience and our fresh perspective. Zelterra rose from her seat, her membranes glowing with quiet pride. When we first encountered humanity, we saw them as primitive because they didn't follow our path. We thought isolation would force them to develop properly. She gestured to the hologram. Instead, it gave them the freedom to develop beyond anything we could have imagined. The chamber's displays showed scenes from across the galaxy. Concordat scientists working alongside human researchers, each learning from the other's approach. Trading ships incorporating both human ingenuity and alien efficiency. New technologies emerging from the combination of different ways of thinking. But the greatest change, Zelterra continued, isn't in our technology or our capabilities. It's in our understanding of progress itself. We thought advancement had to follow a single path. Humanity showed us that there are as many paths forward as there are stars in the sky. The traditional faction speakers sat down, their opposition silenced not by force or argument, but by the evidence of positive change surrounding them. The Unity's hologram shifted again, showing the ship preparing for its next mission. We're establishing joint research stations in every sector, Chen announced, not to teach, but to learn together. Every species has something unique to offer, perspectives that might lead to the next breakthrough. And the spatial tiers, someone asked, are now an opportunity instead of a threat. Dr. Patil replied. Each one teaches us something new about the nature of spacetime. With our combined approaches, we're discovering possibilities that neither humans nor the Concordat could have found alone. Zelterra moved to stand beside the humans. 20 cycles ago, we thought we were being generous by considering whether to allow humanity into our civilization. Today, we understand that they weren't asking for permission to join us. They were inviting us to join them in something greater. The chamber filled with light as the Unity demonstrated one of its new capabilities, a way of viewing reality that revealed the connections between all things. The assembled representatives gasped as they saw their galaxy not as separate systems and species, but as an interconnected whole, full of possibilities they were only beginning to understand. We have a saying on Earth, Captain Chen said softly, watching the light show. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We've proven that with technology, with our response to the spatial tiers. Now we're proving it with civilization itself. As the lights faded, Zelterra looked out over the changed council chamber. The rigid hierarchies were gone, replaced by something more dynamic, more alive. The isolation that was meant to limit humanity had instead prepared them to help lead the galaxy into a new age. So, Chen asked with a smile, what shall we discover next? The question hung in the air like a promise. Around the chamber, representatives of 100 species looked at each other with new eyes, seeing not competitors or inferiors, but partners in an infinite journey of discovery. The path forward wasn't clear, and that they were beginning to understand was exactly as it should be. In the space above, the Unity prepared for its next mission, its hull shimmering with possibilities that defied conventional physics. But now it would not fly alone. Ships of every species were joining it, each bringing their own unique perspectives to the greatest adventure of all. The exploration of what might be possible when different ways of thinking came together. The age of rigid advancement was over. The age of infinite possibility had begun, and it had started, ironically enough, with a civilization trying to isolate a species they thought was too primitive to understand their way of doing things. Looking back, they would all agree, sometimes the best way forward is the path that everyone else thinks is wrong.